Hi everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm just having one or two technical issues, and hopefully, which is quite ironic, but considering what I do. But I'm just making sure that this is actually live. There's about a 20-second delay from what I'm actually doing and it coming out on the web, so I'm just going to wait for a bit. Looks to me like the audio is working. I do have another presentation, a keynote presentation, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be wanting to be shown on the screen. I'll silence that. There we go. So that seems to be working. I can hear myself now, which is not great, but right. So this really is just a continuation from the last sort of vlog that I put together. I'm going to go through this what we really should be doing is the next steps, sort of like take one step at a time, and that's why I've called it a rebellion, because I think that's what we should be doing. We should be rebelling. In fact, it's almost your duty to rebel. It says something in the Magna Carta, something like when you have a tyrannical government, then it's the actual duty of the citizen to have a peaceful rebellion against that government. So that's what I think we should be doing, and I'm going to go through a few things, just early steps. I'm not saying we should have like torches and pitchforks and marching down Downing Street and sort of throw the Prime Minister out. We're not there yet, but just some early steps of what we should be sort of like be cognizant of, be aware of. I think I'm probably just going to give up on this. I'll look more into it. I mean, I've been out in the garden all day. I've got I'm a beekeeper, so I've just been doing a little bit video shooting of some bees and stuff, because I've had to re-queen one hive, which has been put another queen in, because I'm going to start something around bee conservation as well. So I'm all about the native British bee. So I've requeened one hive with a native British queen. Just checked on her to make sure what's happening in that hive. I'm very much a hands-off style of beekeeper. I don't believe in, and it's other people do this and that's fine, but a lot of beekeepers, they're there every week. They're in there doing something. They're checking this, they're checking that. They're looking for mites. They're looking for any diseases, and that's fine. That's just not the way I do it. I look more of a sort of very old traditional way of beekeeping, a very much almost like an Eastern European or Russian method. And this is the way it used to be many years ago, until about the mid 1800s, when these new ways of working, should we call it, the likes of the Leyens hive and Langstroth and Ware in Britain, of the hives that you take apart and stack one on top of the other, and that we've been doing that for 170 years. And what I found as well when I started looking into keeping bees is that there's different types of hive and different types of frame that you put in there, different sizes, and there's quite a few different approaches. Now I'm looking more at the old-fashioned style of approach, more of a long hive rather than a tall hive. But I'll talk about this a bit later, and all if you so fancy. Good evening, everybody. I've got the chat on, and I will be chatting away, and I will be answering your questions. If you've got any questions, just shout them out. I don't think I've set up the super chat function yet. I don't think I've met that threshold. I think it's 1,000 hours and 1,000 subscriptions, and I'm actually up to I think it's about 119 now. So thanks everybody who's subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, because I do believe there's about 50% of people who are subscribed watch. Please subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when I'm on. The timing of stuff's going to be a little bit ad hoc to start off with, and will sort of bed itself down into when I'm live streaming or when I'm doing some sort of pre-recorded stuff. But more thumbs up, the more subscriptions, the better it's going to be for me, and hopefully for you, because I'll be able to get more content out there. So if you tell all your friends, your husbands, your wives, your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your aunts, your hamster even, if he or she's interested, just to try and get me subscriber count up. So hi Roger, hi Vestel1, how you doing? So I'm chatting about bees and whatever. So for some reason I can't get this presentation up, but not to worry, I might stick it on the website later. So this one's called Rebellion, and it's all around what our next steps should be. So I think it's time to start a rebellion, and I'm going to go through what a rebellion actually is. And I've just got this direct from the Wikipedia page, so go and have a look at yourself. Always do your own research. Don't trust a word I'm saying. I'm just some idiot from Newcastle. Always, always, always do your own research is what I always tell people. And I think more and more people are doing that. A lot of people have now. Even the other day I was speaking to a woman in a call centre, and what I think an advantage of this lockdown is that it's given people more time to nothing other than think. Because sorry, I'm sweating. I've just got to the bath. It's because what I was doing. I would normally work. For me to work a 12 or 14-hour day, that's quite normal. And I was quite happy just to let the news wash over us because, come back from work, and quite often I'm working away or working abroad. You're in a foreign land type of thing. You usually stayed in a hotel, or maybe like sometimes I've rented a place for 6 or 12 months. Get home, it's usually 8 or 9 o'clock. Maybe he's got some scoff on the way back, or maybe he's order a pizza or something. And the last thing you want to do is to intellectually engage with the television. Because I've spent literally all day at the coalface, thinking. I think a lot. You're trying to project things. You're trying to do analysis of various things, trying to do designs of various things, and sort of the last thing you want to do is some sort of analytical sort of précis about what the news is actually telling you. So I never had any thought, never gave it any thought that I was being lied to, because it's too knackered basically. I just wanted to switch off and just vegetate in front of a telly for an hour or two, just so I can try and slow my brain down to then get to sleep. And what woke me up, for want of a better phrase, where was I? I was watching MSNBC, I think it was. Yeah, when I was working out in the Middle East, I used to watch the financial news a lot, because that was the only English-speaking TV program at the hotel, and that was Bloomberg. But anyway, I was watching MSNBC, and it was Mika Brzezinski, who's one of the presenters, and Joe Scarborough as a husband. That's one whose intern died under mysterious circumstances that Trump was called them out for. And there was some sort of article on the MSNBC, and then it came back to her, and she said something along the lines of, "No, don't listen to them. Listen to us, because we'll tell you what to think." And I just went, "What? Hold on a minute." So I was watching it online. I was on the Apple TV, I think, so I rewound it. And I watched it 3 or 4 times, and she said, no, don't listen to us, because we'll tell you what to think. And I thought, hold on a minute. Tell you how to think. And that just set something off in my brain going, I need to look into this, because nobody should be telling you how to think. It's not like a cult. A cult will tell you, don't talk to anybody outside, don't have any outside influences, don't think for yourself, because we'll tell you how to think. That's your typical definition of a cult. And when I heard her say, we'll tell you how to think, and I thought, what? Like in a cult? And then I just started digging into it. And I wouldn't say I was convinced, but I'd bought into the narrative that Trump was a black hat, that he was a bad dude, that he was everything that CNN and MSNBC and ABC and the BBC and sort of all this left-wing media. All right, he's obviously a bad guy, because again, I didn't have time to dig into it. Didn't have time to research it. I'm busy researching. I was spending 10, 12, 14-hour days looking at the technical solutions and researching, interactions with that, and, I'm doing sort of security audits and what have you, and working with the cyber security teams. So I haven't got time to start digging into what the BBC are saying or CNN. And I just went down this rabbit hole, and I thought, well, hold on a minute. If all these lies are not lies, then why would and this whole Russiagate thing as well? That just ended up being a right debacle. And then there was the Steele dossier, and I thought, well, if all these people are lying about Trump, and they are, then why? And then that gets us into this whole paedophilia, this whole QAnon thing, about what the QAnon movement is about, and that's been in the news a lot quite recently as well. And I'm not like a QAnon follower, but I do listen to what they say and then obviously evaluate it myself. And it does seem to me that there is a movement, this QAnon movement, and other people as well who are like me, just on the periphery, just listening in, still remaining. I'm not like a fence sitter. I'm listening in to what they're doing, and I'm evaluating it myself on my own criteria. And it's definitely a case of there is definitely an interaction and coordination between the Trump administration, like I mentioned before, and this Q movement. There's definitely a synergy between them, and they do seem to be taking down this global cabal. Just do your own research. Look at the executive orders that Trump has signed. And some people say he's a black hat and it's all a scam. And it could be. It could be a massive psychological operation, and some people are saying it's Israel or it's Mossad or whatever. Do your own research. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. All I'm doing is I'm just standing, looking in and going, well, that looks pretty good. Looking at all these people that have been arrested, all these, these human trafficking rings that have been taken apart, the new movement in addition of Coast Guard and military equipment and planes that are being used down around Florida and the north end of South America, and they've got tons and tons of drugs and fentanyl and cocaine and marijuana, and have arrested thousands of people. And you don't hear about this in the news as well. It's very rarely on the legacy media. I mean, there was something in, was it Barcelona or Spain? I think there was, I think there was 1,000 people, women and children rescued, and a load of people arrested. I think it was something like 70 to 100 people arrested, and I couldn't see any trace of it on the BBC. And I thought, well, and this was quite recently, about 2 months ago. And I thought, well, that's quite odd. That's quite odd. You'd think that even the legacy media would be quite interested in 1,000 women and children being rescued from a human trafficking ring. Nothing at all. The silence was deafening. So I thought, okay, so when I heard Mika Brzezinski saying this on MSNBC, and I thought that's odd. I mean, I was in the armed forces when it was still the Cold War was still on, and we were taught quite a bit about information and disinformation from the likes of the KGB or the FSB it is now, and just all this compromat and stuff that they would do, and a lot of stuff I'm hearing from the legacy media just reminds me of that. Reminds me of this disinformation campaign that you hear the Russians and the communists in general, the Chinese are doing it. When they come out and say, no, we're definitely not. We haven't got like 1 million Uyghurs. That's a terrible thing to say. We're just a re-education camp. That's a typical sort of disinformation campaign that you'd expect from the communists, because that's what we were taught to keep an eye out for. And so I just did more and more digging, and I've come to the conclusion that I could be wrong. I definitely could be wrong again. Do your own research and your own digging. But I think Trump is actually taking his global cabal down. And that's why, and again, it could all be a massive show. It could all be massive disinformation. But I don't think it is. I could be wrong, but I don't think it is. That's why they're so vehemently fighting against him. That's why they're trying pretty much every dirty trick in the book from the Democrat side and some Republicans to run this disinformation campaign. And I believe quite a large number, I'm talking about the Americans here, of Democrats and some Republicans are compromised up to the hilt. And you look at what they're doing over in Portland and New York, like de Blasio's, what he's doing in New York, and what they're doing in Chicago. They're just running these, and California in general, just running these places into the ground. It's like a third world country. And I've been to India, and it reminds me a lot of India, where there's just people living on the streets, in tent city or blankets in cardboard city. It's quite an eye opener. And when I did a bike tour of France, and of Europe actually, and I've been all over the place on my motorbike, and I was doing a tour of Europe on my bike, and I came through France. And I've been through France a few times, like traveling and working around there as well, and just seeing the cardboard cities. Like around Marseille and around the ports and what have you. It's amazing. It's like Africa's been imported into it. These little shanty towns, these little shanty areas. You'll sort of. I mean, I was in Marseille, and on the way into Marseille, took a few of the back roads because I was staying off the main roads and just doing all the back country roads and stuff. And you come across these little shanty towns under the motorway overpasses and stuff, and it looks like hell. It looks like absolute hell. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what a rebellion is. So, and now this is verbatim off the WikiLeaks, Wikipedia website. So it says, rebellion, what is it? Rebellion is an uprising or insurrection. It's a refusal of obedience or order. It refers to the open resistance against the orders of an established authority. And that's what we should be doing. These are our next steps. This is what we should be doing. I've seen some of the footage from Australia, and there's one specifically of this police officer. He's a good 6'2", 6'4". He's a big bloke, and he's got this woman by the throat, literally throttling her, and she's just shouting, "You've got us by the throat! You're throttling us!" And he takes her to the ground, and it's like, wow. I mean, I'm seeing because my grandparents were involved heavily in the fight against the Nazis and the fascists, and I've mentioned my nana was working on the land in Ramsgate, and my granddad, he was in the Battle of the River Plate. He was in the Navy, he was on the submarines for a year, and I lived amongst the people who fought against the Nazis and the fascists. They were everywhere. And I'm really interested in how, because I was always interested in how it got to that effect. How did 1939 happen? What led Hitler to invade Poland, and then obviously, and eventually invade Russia, and that didn't go too well for him. Eventually, there was a fly gone. So when I'm looking at what's happening on the streets of America and here with this BLM and this Antifa. And they've got the same flags in insignia as they did in the 1930s in Germany, and they're using the same tactics, and they've got the same mantras. And what you find is that these Antifa types, these people are going, oh, well, they can't be fascist because they're anti-fascist. Well, that's just the propaganda element of it. It's when you see these far left organisations, it's like Open Society or anti this or anti that. They're really fascists. They're not anti-fascist at all. They're using fascistic techniques and tactics to shut people down using violence and intimidation. And it's our way or we're going to beat you up. And it's the Nazis were no different. I mean, they were National Socialist Deutschland, can't remember the full German, but basically they're the National Socialists. So it's just a slightly different flavour of socialism. It's and the tactics that I see being used by quite a few governments around the world now, in the Western world, remind me of 1930s Germany. And when you see these Antifa type of defund the police, well, that's what they did in Germany, except they had the brown shirts instead of the black shirts, the SA, and the way they sort of like get down on your knees, that's what they did in Germany. There's one guy, was it in America, he's denoting that if you declare yourself as being not disease-free, but being exempt, that's what it is. As being exempt from having to wear a mask, you wear like a yellow badge. And I was like, hold on a minute. They had this whole system in Germany. It wasn't just a yellow Star of David. There was different triangles. I think, was it the orange or red triangle was a political prisoner. And I've got a screen grab somewhere of the actual colour scheme. And it's a different type of badge, different colour, different shape means you're a certain type of prisoner. And it was the Star of David was for Jews, and I think it was the red triangle was for political prisoner, and it's like green and purple and black and what have you. And he's saying that if you're declaring yourself exempt from having to wear a mask, then you should wear a yellow, like a round badge. And it's like, well, this is just reminiscent of 1930s Germany about how this whole sort of people call the Nazis right wing, and I think the right hand side of the far left. And the National Socialists hated the Democratic Socialists, and then all the Russians really, and then obviously there was lots of infighting. When the Nazis got a printing press, they would go around and they would break up the printing press of the communists. They would try and break in to the Nazi printing press. There was lots of infighting. Hitler would often have these big talks. He was a good orator, crap artist, but a great orator. So he would do all these talks at these beer killers and these beer halls, and the Democratic Socialists would come in and there would be these massive fights in the beer halls and stuff. And I would highly recommend reading Mein Kampf. I mean, I've got the book, but I've also the book's good. Like it gives you good insight to his mindset. But the far better is the Audible audio book, because it's the most comprehensive collection of everything. Because there was different versions of Mein Kampf. There'd be the original version he wrote in the early 20s, and there'd be the French version, and then there was the version he gave to the German army. So depending on where you were, depending on what version of Mein Kampf you got, but this one's the whole collection, the unabridged version of everything within all these different versions of Mein Kampf. And what the audio book does, it explains the context of certain references within Mein Kampf. And he does go on about the Jews, and it seems like he goes on about it a lot, but it's only 6% within Mein Kampf that he goes on about it. It's a hell of a revelation. Knowing who presents history and how it's presented, no surprise there. Yes, that's true. Yeah, those who hold control of the past control the present, and those who control the present control the future. That's out of 1984. So I think in order to be aware of what's happening now, it's good to know your history, or at least have an appreciation of it. I mean, I've read lots into the 1930s, and I read a book recently called 1931, which talks about how especially the Americans were investing heavily into the German financial markets, and how Germany couldn't even pay the civil service, and they were just borrowing more money and more money and more money. And then all of a sudden, everyone in 1931 just took the money out, and then the economy just nosedived after that, and you had hyperinflation. And that really sort of triggered the ability for Hitler to step in, because he promised, lots of infrastructure rebuilding, and he started off Volkswagen, and he had a hand in designing the Beetle, or the Bug, as they call it now, as the Americans call it. And I don't know if you've ever driven in Germany, but the autobahns are great. I actually got done for speeding, ironically. I got a speeding fine in the autobahns. I didn't know you could get done for speeding. That only happened once, mind. I learned a lesson after that. But I worked in Germany for 9 months, so that was quite interesting. So know your history, and then you can see it repeating now, I think. So anyway, we need to basically stop being obedient, stop doing what the government want us to do. Stop wearing masks, refuse the social or antisocial distancing. I've spoken to my new GP, and I thought this would be the case, but I thought I'd ask anyway. I said, what's the chances of me getting hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic? And she was telling me, previous doctor, Australian guy, in his 60s, a fantastic bloke, just told you straight, typical Aussie bloke, tells you straight what the crack is. Rang up, spoke to this new GP of mine, and she's only been out of medical school about 6 years, she said. And I inquired about this hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic, as a preventative measure. And she said, oh no, well, we're driven by the General Medical Council, we're taking a direction from the WHO. And I was driving at the time, but I was still having a bit of a chat on that. And I said, hold on, the World Health Organization, you do realise they're literally the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. And also Tedros, he's actually been convicted. He's a Marxist terrorist. Oh yeah, but we're listening. We are listening to them, and I'll not sign a prescription with hydroxychloroquine on. If you want it, you've got to get it elsewhere. And there are private doctors, no doubt, that'll you'll bung them some cash. I'm sure they'll give you it. And I just said, right, okay, and I'm probably going to have to change my GP, but I was just amazed by how they're taking direction from the WHO, probably one of the most corrupt organisations in the Western world at the moment. Well, that and the UN. So I think we've got to stop doing as what we're told. And when I'm looking at what people are saying, especially on Anna Breeze's channel, about how people feel intimidated and that's why they wear a mask. It's like when I was doing the Tough Mudders. I did one Tough Mudder in 2014. I did 10 in 2015, and some of the obstacles are really large. And there's the wall, and I think that's about 5 meters or something, 4, 5, 6 meters, about 5 meters. I think it's 5.5 meters, and it's basically just a rope up and a rope down, and you'd be standing there waiting in line in the queue to get on some of these obstacles, and you hear people going, "Oh, I'm really scared," and I'd help people over them. And I say, right, tell you what, look at it now. It looks absolutely massive. And you're scared to go across it. Don't worry, I'll help you across. You'll not fall, because if you do, I'll catch you. And I'd go up with them and down with them. And then they'd run on about 5 or 10 meters. And I'd go, right, stop now and look back at what you've done. 5 minutes ago, that was insurmountable. But now you've done it and you've crossed that barrier. You've literally broken the duck's back on that. So next time, you might still be a bit scared, but now you know you can do it. And that's what I think we need to do with the masks. I think, yeah, it can be a bit scary. I mean, I'm fine, I'm 6'2", so I'm not bothered. But not many people are. But a lot of people are intimidated by looking, and maybe, I don't know if people can talk with a mask on, but I've never worn a mask and I never will. Or even on public transport. I've not been on the trains recently, but I'm not going to wear a mask. Apparently if you go to hospital and you don't wear a mask, which I won't, you can't get any treatment. What's that about? That's more of an indoctrination. It's supposed to be a national health service, not national indoctrination service. So I think we've just got to be brave. And I mentioned courage the last time in my last vlog, where it's not the absence of fear, it's doing it despite being fearful. And when I talked to my granddad about the Battle of the River Plate, and I'd recommend watching the film actually, and he said to me, it's not like the show on the film, because he was 19 at the time. He said, we fought for 3 days and 3 nights, and I said, we're not scared. He goes, terrified. He says, everybody was terrified. He says, but you had a job to do, so you had to do it. So it was despite the fear, they still kept on going. And I think that's what we've got to do as a people, as a nation, as a community, is support each other and do these things despite being fearful. Because I was inspired by my nana and granddad, who stood up to ultimate tyranny. I mean, my nana's friends, they were getting killed on a daily basis. She'd wake up and some of her friends were killed, because where Ramsgate is, it was getting shelled on a regular basis. They were getting shelled from the north coast of France. One of the first doodlebugs in Britain hit her cabbage patch field. She told us all about that. She was strafed by Messersmiths. She told me once she was standing at the front door of a house in Ramsgate, on the edge of Ramsgate. A bomb landed at her gate, and she said, all I knew, there was this large flash, and next thing I know, I was blown through the house. And the only reason I know I was blown through the house is because my head and shoulders hit off the back door. She let you blown clean through the house. Lucky to survive. She didn't hear anything, just saw this bright flash. So if they can stand up and do it, I'm bloody sure we can as well. So yeah, let's stand up and do it, and let's be civilly disobedient. Don't wear masks. Don't, when the government tells you to do this, don't be scared. That's the constant message. Oh, you need to be frightened. You need to be scared. You need to be fearful. And then you do as we're told. And as far as I'm concerned, all this mask malarkey is doing is training you to get ready for the next step. And the next step is the mandatory vaccination, because this whole thing around you've got to wear a mask. You've got to, these countries, if you go to these countries, you've got to be quarantined for 14 days. No reason why, no explanation around that. No rhyme or reason. It's then going to become, and Bill Gates has even said this, this is the problem with psychopaths, which I found out to my cost. Psychopaths tell you what they're doing because they think you're too stupid. This is the thing. It's almost like like a Bond villain in the volcano with the white cat. They think they're far too intellectually superior for you to work out what they're doing, so they'll tell you what they're doing. And I'm trying to write a book. I'm writing a book on my interactions with the psychopath, which nearly costs me life. The psychopaths tell you what they're doing, and when you learn to read it, it becomes really obvious. So Bill Gates is telling you what he's doing, and so is the government. We're going to make you wear masks. We're going to lock you down. We're going to do little hotspots just randomly. This PCR test, the guy who invented the PCR test has said you can't use it for testing for this virus, because if you've had the common cold or swine flu or any one of a number of infections or flus or viruses, it'll come up in this PCR test as what we call a false positive. As in, it looks like it's a positive, but that's a lie, it's a false positive. And that could be anywhere between 50 to 80%. So these tests aren't reliable at all. And there's more and more now, I don't know if you're keeping an eye on what's happening in the media, I'll try not to knock my microphone, there's more and more revelations now of the false accounting of these numbers. I think we had a reduction of about 5,000 so far. I've read recently I think it was either the Telegraph or the Mail. I mean, I still read the legacy media every now and then, but I'm very sceptical of it. But there's certain journalists now starting to sort of challenge the narrative, which is always a good thing. So I think what we'll slowly see, or slowly over time we'll see this eventually sort of peeling back of the numbers. And it was, 5,000 here, 3,000 there. And it'll eventually get, I think, quite low. But what they won't do is they won't just release it all in one go. I think they'll slowly drip feed the real numbers out eventually. And they're slowly drip feeding the truth out to us as well. Keep an eye on what's happening in Australia and New Zealand with these lockdowns. I mean, they're smashing people's windows. You're not allowed any more than 5 miles away from your house. They're following people with drones. Just read about Manchester police. There was a children's birthday party, and 3 families were having a party in the garden. So they went round and I think they've given them all fines by the sounds of it. What's the point in that? If you look at the figures, I think of today, I think it's been 3 days so far with no deaths, none of these COVID. 1984 deaths. I think it's pretty much over. And what they're showing now is an uptick in the testing, which means an uptick in the cases, probably all false. I mean, I had the swine flu, so if I take a test, I'll test positive for COVID, even though I don't have it, because I've had the swine flu. So that's just it's another false positive. So we're going to see lots of these new cases. Oldham's on lockdown at the minute. They're going to be locking down certain areas because they've got to keep you scared. Because when the vaccine comes out, and it's a massive race, the ones that they're not testing these vaccines, the one that they're doing no animal testing on, these are the suppliers of these vaccines who've got complete immunity from any legal action. So if they're that safe, why would that be a thing? And if you also do some research on what happened with the swine flu vaccine, because that was given to 1,000 people, and that was some quite horrific side effects. There's people have killed themselves, people have died from it, people have killed themselves because of the effects. I was watching one nurse, she said she had it, and her nervous system's completely shot. And is it narcolepsy, I think they're suffering from? A lot of people suffering from a narcoleptic disease or episodes, and it's mainly affected children, and the government's handed out 60 million in compensation. So, and if you look at the American compensation for vaccine, and it's quite a high bar to pass this vaccinated damage, that's at $4.2 billion at the moment. So, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all, but what I am aware of is people lying about the side effects of it. It's like Gulf War syndrome. People say Gulf War syndrome, or the government says Gulf War syndrome doesn't exist. Well, I actually know somebody who's ex-Special Forces, ex-SES. He was over in Gulf War 1, a guy called Duncan, and I met him at my uncle's funeral about 3 years ago, and I hadn't seen Duncan for about 10 years. And I thought, Duncan looks a bit drunk, doesn't he? I mean, I know Scotty's like a drink, but that was like 11 o'clock in the morning. And I couldn't understand a word he was saying. Just literally was complete gibberish. And I was thinking, wow, he's had a skinful. And then went back to one of my other uncle's houses, who have got a huge family like. And I said, Duncan was a bit drunk, wasn't he? He goes, no, Duncan wasn't drunk. That's all of the nerve damage and dementia he's got. He's only mid-50s, and his body's completely knackered. He's done in for. He gets no help whatsoever from the government. So I've seen it for myself, and he was obviously ex-SES, a super fit bloke, mega fit bloke, honestly like an Olympic athlete, and he's literally like an old man. Literally is. It's terrible. So just got to be aware of the lies and misinformation that we're being given, not just by the government, but also the media as well. Hold on, I'm going to look at some, before going about the rebellion thing, I'm going to look at some questions. Even though can't share, I'm on a 3-day ban, can't watch now because the COVID fits a Mrs. Pickle in LOL, but watch later. Yeah, it's going to be on later. This is, as well as me doing this live streaming bit, it's also recorded so you can watch it later as well. What would your answer be to someone in a shop, for example, why you're not wearing a mask? I would say I'm exempt. Simple as that. And because of the Disability Discrimination Act, nobody's allowed, even the police aren't allowed to ask you why. And I was in a supermarket yesterday, just in the town centre, and the guy who's the security guy stand at the entrance, and it was like he was wearing one but just down to here. It was a waste of time, one of these medical masks. The people behind the counters weren't wearing any, but apparently the perspex, if you've got about 2 or 3 foot of perspex, that high, that's perfectly safe, and some holes and stuff in it, that's fine, but person to person, that's not. And I've mentioned in some of the comments I've put on some of the either on my channel or on Anna's channel, previously in 24, when I was in Sainsbury's, there was none of these little dividers, these little like Toblerone triangle dividers you get. And I was like, all right, where the first time I've been shopping since this whole mandated masking came out, and I was the only person in the supermarket. Maybe about 100, 200 people. I was the only customer in the supermarket not wearing a mask. And so I get to the checkout again with the perspex everywhere. Said to the woman, where's your little triangular things to divide up the shopping between your customers? She went, we're not allowed them anymore because of the virus. I went, what do you mean the virus? As in, the virus gets on them. Yeah. I said, okay. So how does the virus know to get onto them, but none of your produce on the shelves? And she was like, oh, that's a great question, actually. I said, also, Why is it not on the card machine either? Because obviously I'm pressing the buttons, and the person who's just pressed the buttons, because they weren't, if you wanted to pay a cashier to go to the self-service thing, if I'm pressing the buttons and the person's literally seconds before me pressed the buttons, how come the virus doesn't jump from there to me? She was like, can't answer that. I went, yeah, no, because it's a scam. It's all a scam. It's a hoax. So it's only convenient, or it's only conveniently on the stuff that doesn't matter. So it's not on anywhere where you pay, and it's not on any of the produce you pick up. So it's handy that the doors open themselves. Like, that's really handy. So I was in another supermarket yesterday, and the woman mentioned something about me not wearing one. I said, hold on a minute. You can't ask me why I'm not wearing one. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you start to ask me why I'm not wearing a mask, you're in danger of getting yourself a £9,000 fine. It's up to £9,000. And also the business is up to £9,000, because then you're entering the territory of Disability Discrimination Act. And I said, surely your employer's told you that? She said, no, never been told. So all these weeks, I mean, luckily no one's ever taken umbrage, and I don't think she's asked anybody. But yeah, so if somebody in a supermarket asks you why you're not wearing a mask, just say, I'm exempt. And if anybody asks you, well, why are you exempt? And obviously they say they're not, or they think they're not, just say, well, you're not allowed to ask me, actually. It doesn't matter if you're the police, or people who own a shop, or the people who work in a shop, or just some Joe Public, they're not allowed to ask you. So, I mean, I can't wear one anyway, for medical reasons, but that's not the point. I wouldn't wear one. I don't wear one. A little bit of juice to wet the larynx. The government has come clean, or has to come clean. It's getting seriously ridiculous. It's gone beyond stupidity. I'm in shock from that alone. Yeah, isn't it? Isn't it getting beyond stupid? What will happen in the future? I mean, because obviously I'm very much into history, as well as I'm in science and technology and stuff as well. People are going to look on this period, and I've said to my kids, this is bigger than World War II. I mean, World War II was massive. I knew loads of people that took part in it. I knew lots of people that suffered from it. As my grandparents were still fighting the Second World War up to the deaths from the mental trauma of it. This is bigger than World War II. This is a global hoax, and I used to think David Icke was a complete nut job. And I mean, listening to him now about what's going on, because obviously I'm very much a technologist. Where he says this is going in the next few years, I think he's spot on. I really do. And I'm not so sure about the reptilian side of things, mind. I know we've got reptilian brains and what have you, but this whole thing about the Queen turning into a reptile. And then when he mentioned, what was it? He mentioned something about the moon being hollow, and I thought, well, that's quite an interesting hypothesis, because again, I've looked at how did we get the moon? I mean, how did it come here? I mean, it's the size of it. It's too big for the Earth. You know, it's about from the size, it's about a quarter the size, and it's too big. So it's too big for the Earth to have just grabbed it from a gravitational perspective. Because if it was that big and if it was zooming past us, it would have maybe just like shot off at an angle. Might have had a bit of a gravity acceleration in the amount of the gravity slingshot. How that works is that it goes as this. It carries the slingshot effect, carries around the planet. You either hit the planet or you miss the planet, or you get this gravitational slingshot. You only speed up as fast as the planet's going. So it should have by rights either hit into us, miss us completely, or shot by us. The way the physics works, you can't just go out and grab it. It's not like you've got catching a baseball. That's not how it works. And then we've got this whole thing about smashing into the planet, becoming its own little planetoid or a moon itself, and then in order for it to get to the size it is, it's got to then smash in again. And I've listened to David Icke mention that, and it's like, yeah, that's quite difficult. But I'm not saying it can't be done, but that's a lot of stuff's got to be put in place for that to happen. So that could be how it's happened. So it's either I don't buy we caught it through gravitational, like catching the baseball and the baseball glove effect. That just the physics of that doesn't make sense to me. Could it have been a planet the size of Mars that crashed into us? Possibly. That could have, yeah, possibly, but I'm very much doubtful. Again, there's so many things that have got to happen in place that possibly, but I'm not convinced. And then his third explanation was it's a base or UFO or some sort of space station brought by aliens. And I say, well, no, that's a leap. I might be on the fence a bit about, smashing up the planet a bit, but the whole it's basically a small planet-sized space station that's been brought by aliens with about 30 mile of dust on it to protect it from asteroid and comet damage. That's a bit of a stretch. So I don't believe everything he's got to say. I'm open-minded about that, mind. As in, for extraordinary claims, need extraordinary evidence. And if it's going to have loads of aliens living inside of it and keeping an eye on what we're doing, I need a ton of evidence to show that. I need the aliens there. So now, yeah, Graham, he has the plans. This is how we built it. This is how we constructed it. This is how we got it here. This is how we stopped it from smashing into your planet once we got it here. Because obviously the amount of energy to move it and then stop it would have been massive. So I'm going to need a lot of convincing. But the only thing I will say is that I looked into this. I did a little bit of digging around what he mentioned about the moon ringing like a bell. And he's right on that respect, where they tried two different tests, the lefty seismometers, on the moon's surface, and then they smashed a couple of things into it. I think it was the satellite was the biggest one, and he said it rang for about 2 or 3 hours like a gong, and that did happen, and it did ring like that, and really did expect like a dull thud. So I can't explain that. I don't know what the moon's made of. Probably made of cheese. Hopefully it's cheddar. Maybe it's Wensleydale. I've seen a documentary where some guys, one bloke and a dog went up and it was made of Wensleydale apparently, but that might have been fake. If you watch Bruce sees all on the YouTube shows. All right, yeah. I think I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his surname. Yeah, we are in the technocracy. That is true. And I think because I work in the field of tech, and I'm going to get on this on different vlogs. I'm going to advise people on how to stay safe, how to protect yourself, how to protect your data. I did an exercise for a government organisation, and we stitched various bits of data, metadata. I can't remember this guy's name. This guy was in the Second World War. He's as important to the Second World War as Alan Turing, and he was basically the inventor of stitching metadata together. So he would get all this radio signals traffic, and he could work out what size of armies are where. And this led to this whole false narrative they were projecting around the invasion of the mainland of the continent wasn't going to take place in Normandy. It was going to take place in, I think it was Norway. I think it was, in memory serves. And that's why I had all this radio signals traffic. And he was as important as Alan Turing. So I'll look at his name. Can't remember off the top of my head. So he basically invented the metadata industry, and that's what the likes of Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Amazon, they harvest all this metadata. And that's why if you go onto Google Maps, you can see the name of your Wi-Fi on Google Maps where your house is. And that's quite bad, actually, because if I get your IP address, I can tell you the name of your Wi-Fi. I mean, I can tell you what colour your house is, what type of house it is, probably what car you drive, where your washing line is, name of your Wi-Fi, just off one IP address. And I can get your IP address, but there's various different ways of getting your IP address. It's not that hard. So metadata and the amount of metadata and what to do with it. And I think a good example of this is, this is going back quite a few years now, about 5, 6, 7 years. There was a guy in America who got some sort of pregnancy test kit or some sort of, I think it was Target, and it was maybe some sort of discount voucher thing for his daughter, his 15-year-old daughter. And they had worked out that she was pregnant by what she was looking at online. And people can through this metadata, and it's not just what you're looking at online, it's demographical data, it's data they get from the electoral roll, it's the where you live, because your IP address will give you the streets and they'll give you roughly the sort of the door where you live. So it's quite, and also that can be false information, because I've heard of instances where people have tracked people down using their IP address and it was incorrect data. And there was one house, I don't think it was firebombed, but I think it was threatened with firebombing. This is in England, again, going back a few years. So stitching all this metadata together is quite powerful. So we did a proof of concept, and we were pulling the data from the telephony switches, HR data, and web traffic. And these are for tens of thousands of civil servants. And we were just showing the management what we could do with this metadata. The unions didn't know about it. And we actually caught some people who were doing full-time eBay businesses when they should have been on the phones. So they'd come in, they'd log in on the phones, they'd pretend to make a few phone calls, and then for the rest of the day they'd be selling stuff on eBay. So they got sacked if a number of people got warnings. And then we were told by the management, right, delete that. Don't tell anybody we did it, because if the unions find out, we're in big trouble. So metadata, and that's just off 3 small bits of data. So if I've got your browsing traffic, if I know where you live, I know the type of person you are, if I can get the data from a supermarket, which is why I don't get stuff delivered, Ocado, when you're browsing around on the internet, if you're looking at like Rightmove or Zeus, you're looking at Auto Trader, all these websites sell their data, and it's you'll get what's called data brokers. These are people that will buy this data in. They'll build all these models out of it, and then they'll resell that data. And these are data brokers, and you find these type of industries also work in in the telemetry industry. So if you've got one of these insurance jobs where you've got a little black box that records how you drive, when you drive, accelerating, cornering too hard, that all goes into this data broker, and then they sort of amalgamate all this data, they aggregate it all, they create all sorts of models. In the insurance industry, actually, that's all based on data, and it's things like if you brake hard within a certain time period on the motorway, travelling at 70 mile an hour motorway speeds, you're more likely statistically to have an accident, or you're statistically more likely to have an accident within 5 miles of your home if you've just left a fast moving roadway. And they build all these models on. It's like if you've had an accident, even if it's not your fault, if you've had 2 accidents in the last 3 years, you're statistically more likely to have a claim. So even if you have a non-fault accident, like I had an instance where my car was parked in a car park, this is down at Thames Valley, gets an email from security, even though I'm in the ground floor. So can you come to the security desk, please? There's been an incident in the car park. And I was like, right, okay. Goes out to the security desk. There's a security guy and 3 people standing around me, standing around the security desk. And I'm like, right, what's going on? And they went, this gentleman's car has rolled into your car in the car park. Like, oh, great. Goes out and there's this was Discovery TDI embedded in the side of my car. And the bloke was going, because there was one of the delivery drivers had noted it and then told the security guy, he's one of the people there. And this guy was going, I've definitely put the handbrake on. I'm sure I put the handbrake on. And I'm thinking, great, I've now got a Discovery literally welded to the side of my car. This is when I had a Golf. And I said, look, mate, handbrake on, handbrake off. It's academic, really, because the results are still the same. And I then had to put a claim in for that. So I got a replacement car. Took about 2 or 3 weeks to get the repairs done. It was about $3,000 in total. Most of it was the replacement car I had. And I had no end of phone calls from do you want to make a claim for personal injury? No. So what basically had done, somebody had sold me data about having my car in. It was probably either the car hire people or the garage where the car repairs were done. And yeah, so it's quite important to try and protect your data as much as possible when you're online. And I'm going to cover this in a different. I know I've been talking about it for a while, but I'm going to cover this in a different podcast about how to do that. I've got an iPhone, and I've switched off all sorts of things on the iPhone, all this background tracking that can be done. And I'll go over that, how to protect yourself online, using VPNs and various other things. And I'll talk about that at a later date. Bruce the Moon Man, well worth a look. Yeah, I'll look into that. I'll do a look at that. Again, because I'm open-minded but sceptical. As in, I was just talking to someone, my mate last night actually, about the Sphinx. Now, I've been to Egypt, and I did the Valley of the Kings, went and looked at Giza, looked at the pyramids, looked at the Sphinx. And when I was out there, I did geology at school, and I did notice, because how the Sphinx is built, it's actually dug out of the bedrock. So they dug down into the bedrock and then carved the Sphinx out of the bedrock. And there's still about a 3 foot depression or it's carved out, and there's like a 3 foot step, and then there's like that's the level that the Giza pyramids are built on. There's 3 foot step down over, and that's the level that the Sphinx is in. And I did notice around the perimeter, let's go back 12 years now, like, and I thought that looks, because there's loads of wind damage on the Sphinx, and wind damage and water damage are quite different. And I noticed the water damage around the edge, and I thought, well, that looks like water damage. And then I immediately thought, oh, yeah, man, that can't possibly be a thing, because let's face it, we're in the desert. There's literally, there's behind you there's Cairo. It's literally 100 meters. There's a Burger King about 100 meters behind you. So sand, desert, Cairo. No, there's no water. There's absolutely no water whatsoever. And I was watching Joe Rogan podcast, which I'd highly recommend, and a guy called Professor Robert Schoch was on there, and Graham Hancock was. I've watched Graham Hancock on there as well, and Randall Colson, and they talk about water effect, the water erosion around the Sphinx. And I was going, well, hold on a minute, I've been to the Sphinx. Loads of wind erosion on the Sphinx, water erosion around the perimeter, but that can't be a thing. And then this professor, geologist, said, oh, by the way, in order for it to be this type of water erosion, would have happened around about 12,000 years ago. And it's about 1,000 years of rain to get that. And I was like, hold on a minute. So you're trying, and this is what I'm talking about, being open-minded. It's like, in order for there to be that much water, it would have had to happen when there was more of a clement environment. You know, it was a wetter environment. This is where the crescent around the Middle East, the Fertile Crescent, it would have had to have been 1,000 years worth of rainfall in order to get that level of water erosion. And I thought, right, I agree with that. I was there, and it was obviously like a desert, but it was a different environment 12,000 years ago. So in order for that to have been, because it's dug out of the bedrock, so it would have had to happen before that. So you've got this, say, based on that evidence alone, that the Sphinx is at least 12,000 years old. And I thought, right, I'm quite happy. He's presented the evidence in a logical format. I agree that it didn't make any sense for it to be 4,000 or 5,000 year old. It was repaired 2.5, or was it 4,000? It was repaired about 4,000, 5,000 years ago anyway. And the repairs look a bit terrible, actually. So yeah, I'm quite happy to accept, on the given evidence that I've heard, that the Sphinx is not as young as the Egyptologists would have us to believe. Because I think a lot of scientists, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I follow science a lot. I think there's a lot of scientists who've sort of like staked their reputations and almost their career on what they've said 30 years ago, and they're no way willing to change that, because that'll make them look like fools. So there's a massive de-incentive to accept any new information or evidence that comes in. And it's been the same like this for hundreds of years. I mean, when tectonic plates technology, or the tectonic plate theory, was brought about, that took 30 years for that to be accepted. Now we just, bits of earth moving about, floating on this magma, we accept that as standard now. Same with hand washing back in the 1800s. It took, I think it was a Ukrainian guy, it took him 30 years to get hand washing accepted in the medical profession as something that's a good idea. And it's the same with waterborne diseases. I think, what was it? Was it in London? They thought cholera was airborne. And again, it took about 30 years for it to be accepted as it's waterborne. Because one of the guys went and took a pump off the handle off a water pump next to a coffee house, and he noticed that all of the cases dropped in that area. So, like, new evidence as it comes in, I'm open-minded, and I will reevaluate the position on whatever I've said. So if I've said, well, actually, because when I first heard this stuff about people are saying that the Sphinx is 12,000 plus years old, it's like, well, where's that come from? I don't believe that. But when I've seen the evidence and I've listened to it and I've read about it, and then I think, right, on the evidence presented, yes, I'm quite happy to accept that the Sphinx is a lot older than what the Egyptologists are stating. It's like we're told that the Giza pyramids are somehow connected to various what's it, not Tutankhamun, who's anyways, various tombs. I can't remember the names of the guys that were put in there, but there's no hieroglyphs in there. So I'm quite prepared to accept the fact that the pyramids aren't tombs built for various pharaohs. In fact, when I was there, I thought, yeah, I don't accept the fact these were built in 20 years either. Not at all. So we've got 30 years of COVID crap. Well, they are talking about it taking at least 2 years. VPN any good to protect your data? Right. This is what I can tell you about VPNs. Because I've done a lot of government work, I've talked to quite a few people on the spooky side of it, the GCHQ types, and I've spoke with people who look after networks for like Foreign Commonwealth Office services and MI6 and stuff. And I've actually been in presentations where they detail about, and I've been at some of these network operations centres as well, NOCs they call them, or SOCs sometimes, security operations centres, where you've got to take all your phones and stuff out and put them in little boxes and what have you before you're allowed in. So yeah, and I'm not going to tell you the details of what they've told us, because obviously I don't want the black hats to find out what MI6 have. It's not as good as you hope as anyway, their infrastructure. But one thing I will tell you is one of the GCHQ guys, one of the network operations center guys, told me that VPNs are great. They love VPNs. So, and the reason why is because VPN services, that's like what they call a concentrator. So thousands of people will use a VPN. So it's safe in one respect, as in we've got this Reaper law where literally every man and his dog, council, water board, anyone in the government, the police can just, without a warrant, just go in and look at what your history is. And what they can see inside the Reaper is, because it's HTTPS, they can see the website you've gone to. And I can talk more about how HTTPS works, but it's probably getting a bit too technical. Because it's a secure handshake. Once they've agreed on what the protocols are and what level, what bit of encryption they're going to use, everything inside the conversation, they can't be seen. They can see the domain you're going to. So if you're going to, say, google.com, well, actually, Google's not a good idea as they sell your data. But if you go to a website, they can see what website you've been to. They can see how much data has been up and down. But what they can't see is actual pages that you've gone to, and they can't see the data inside of that. So they can see domain names, they can see duration of sessions, they can see data up and down, they can see data flows up and down, but they can't see the content of what goes inside that. So VPNs are good, but you've got to keep in mind that if the likes of GCHQ or MI5 or MI6, and that is also a deliberate ploy by our security services to push your traffic flow offshore and then back on again, so they can then, without a warrant, look at what you're doing. I do know that for a fact because I've seen it. So there's a deliberate ploy to push some of our traffic offshore, so they can then, without a warrant, treat it as foreign, which is quite sneaky. So VPNs are good in general, but if you're doing something illegal, well, I would tell you not to straight away. But VPNs can be hacked, and it's what's known as a data concentrator as far as the intelligence services are concerned. So they would hack into the VPN company. And also, you've got to be aware of that. A lot of these VPNs say that they're not keeping logs, but you've just got their word to take for that. So you don't know. And also, and I'm not getting into conspiracy theory here, just be aware that some security services, and I'm not talking about the Brits, I'm talking about other security services, and I'll talk a little bit about Lebanon as well, is that they will set up VPN services in order for you to use them, so they can actually peer into what you're doing. So when I was in Lebanon, in order for me to use Skype, I had to get a VPN out of the country, because the Lebanese intelligence services try and stop voice over IP. In Lebanon, because I worked at it for 9 months, one of the laws inside Lebanon is that you're not allowed to do voice over IP, VoIP it's called, encrypted voice traffic between buildings, except the banks seem to be able to get away with it. So when I was out there looking at their VoIP system, they said, actually, what we've got here is we're not allowed to VoIP between buildings. They do anyway, but they could get arrested for it. Very paranoid, the intelligence services, well, and the Lebanese people in general. But good rights as well, So, VPNs are good, but there's always the possibility of either a foreign intelligence service setting them up, or our intelligence services hacking into them, and they are very good at that. And the people inside MI5, MI6, and GCHQ are really good at hacking things, but not all of them are, because the target area now is getting massive from their perspective, so we've got to employ more people. So there are specialists, and they are very good at what they do, But what you'll find is with this with this whole, we've got to employ these type of people with these immutable qualities versus these type of people, you'll find that the actual level of competency goes down. And I see this time and time again inside large organisations. Things like affirmative action, it's like, right, it's less about merit and more about, do you fit these tick boxes? And I see the quality of stuff going down. And this only happens in certain countries in the West. Japanese aren't doing it. The South Koreans aren't doing it. The Chinese definitely aren't doing it. And this is why I'm all for merit. I don't care. As I mentioned before, I don't care what you look like, what you sound like, what you dress like. That's not bothered. It's can you do the job to a competent level? That's what we should all be measured against. And if it's yes, great. If it's no, sorry, but you're not for us. And it should be as cut and dry as that. I don't even know what a VPN is. Okay, so VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and normally you've got a little bit of software that sits on your either your laptop or it's the same on your phone, on your tablet, and you connect to this service. It like listens for a connection, and it encrypts the traffic between you and that service. And that service is just usually a cluster of servers. You can get hardware devices that do it as well, and you can get virtual instances within the hardware device. So you connect to a service. Between you and that service, it's totally encrypted. The outside world can't see into it. There are things like what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, but that's really difficult to do. It's not impossible, but that's really state level, or someone who's seriously wanting to see what you're doing. So, and a lot of businesses use them. And I've set up all sorts of devices, VPN devices. And so I've done things where you dial in as well. So you'll dial in, you'll have a little bit of what's called chaps, a bit of encryption chat. And it's the encryption sort of chatter backwards and forwards is, hi, how are you doing? I'd like to have an encrypted conversation with you. And the server bit goes, hi, how are you doing? Yes, I'd like to have one with you. They pass each other what's known as a public key. Like, you encrypt it with this, and I'll encrypt it with that. And so you send encrypted traffic using their public key, and they decrypt it using their private key. And so unless you've got what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, or they can actually crack the cryptography, which again, you're talking state level really. And it's not a case of it being impossible to see. What you're trying to do is to make it as difficult as possible from a resources and time perspective, to make it as difficult and costly as possible for someone to try and crack inside that VPN tunnel, that virtual private network tunnel. And this is why, I mean, I've known about the Huawei stuff since 2008. I did some work for BT Global Services. Syntegra when I joined, it was called. So, and what Huawei do, they provide you the box and all of their chips, so they don't have to worry about breaking the encryption. This is why people like Huawei are quite dangerous, because they are trying to do this 5G. We'll do it all on the cheap. They did something, they put the network in for the African National Congress, and with over 5 nights they stole all of their data because they put the network in. So if you provide the network devices, it doesn't matter what your encryption is at either end, because you've got the ability to listen to what's called clear text. So you've got the ability just to hoover up all this data and then push it out to whatever your destination point is. So, and that leads you to the problem of, and this is a problem I've had in the past as well, is that when you get these very expensive encryption boxes or load balancers, or sometimes the same, it's quite difficult to get the specific skill set to set them up correctly, because all you need to do is configure it badly by one bit, and they can be quite easily hackable if you misconfigure it. Anyway, I'm not going to get into too much, but yes, so a virtual private network is an encrypted chat between two devices, normally your client device and some sort of server device in the cloud, or if it's a corporate VPN, it's normally a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone. And you tend not to do too much on smartphones, because VPNs on phones, again, because sort of stuff I've done includes phones as well. You try not to use VPNs on phones because it drains the battery if your VPN's on all the time. So it tends to be mainly laptops, or you try and make it mainly laptops, their battery life is a lot better. So yeah, and if it's a VPN for a business or an organization, that tends to be into their data centers, and you normally have at least 2 data centers. Right. Anyway, let's get back to what time is it? Well, we've been going for a while now, and we're not even past the first slide. So, rebellion. A rebellion originates from a sentiment of indignation and disapproval of a situation, and then manifests itself by the refusal to submit or to obey the authority responsible for this situation. And that's where I think we are at the moment. Rebellion can be individual or collective, peaceful, civil disobedience, civil resistance, non-violent resistance, and that's what we should be doing. I mentioned back in my last vlog that we should be looking at non-violent rebellion against this tyrannical government and organisation. And I mean the police, various councils, various businesses, not just the government as well. So a non-violent, disobedient resistance and rebellion. If you go into a business and they're demanding card payments only and they won't take cash, I would suggest we don't use that business anymore, and then tell everybody about it. And we're seeing quite a lot of backlash against Goodyear, and also people calling it Nonsflix in Netflix, and that's a good thing, and that shows you the power of the people. That sounds a bit communist, but yeah, it sounds it's basically a crowd, power of the crowd, power of the many. So if you go into a business, like I don't buy B&Q anymore. I went in there once. And I forgot what I was buying, and it was like, oh, it's card payment only. I said, no, I'll pay cash. Oh, no, we don't accept cash. I was like, why not? Oh, because of the virus. I go, okay, I'll pay for it that once because I needed whatever it was. And I said, I'm never coming back here again. As long as you have card payment only and you don't accept cash, I'm never coming back. And I've never gone back. So it's like, if I go into a shop and I'll say, even if I'm going to pay by card, I'll say, do you accept cash? And if they say yes, obviously I'm paying by card anyway, maybe. But if I go into a place and they say, no, we only accept card, I'll just turn around and walk out. Because it looks to me, and this is what David Icke's mentioned, and I do agree with him, again, because I've got to take, from a technological perspective, you've got to take this 30,000 foot view, you've got to look into the future, you've got to future gaze, I call it. When I'm designing these large systems, you've got to look 5 or 6 years into the future of what's coming down the line, both within their industry and also within the technology industry. And you can't call it, to a certain extent, but you've got rough ideas from a trend perspective what's coming down the line. And you do talk a lot to the vendors. So when you're buying all this IT equipment, you ask them what they're planning in the near future. I mean, likes of HP, they've got presentations full of like, this is what we've currently got doing now, and they've got the various moonshots, they call them, where like, this is what we're planning the next 2 or 3 years from a technology perspective. And a lot of the vendors will have that. They've got their 5-year roadmaps. It doesn't matter if you're buying intrusion detection systems or load balancers or firewalls, they've all got their roadmaps of where their technology is going to be heading in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So you've got to try, and when you're designing these systems, you've got to try and keep an eye on that, as well as what you're doing today. You've got to look at what's happening tomorrow. So I think we're trying to lead us to a stage where it's a cashless society. And I think if we do go down that track, then when you're looking at digital currency, when you're looking at universal credit, I think it's a bad idea. It almost looks like they're trying to destroy businesses deliberately. I mean, mine's gone down the toilet, but I'm starting up a new business, and I'm also, which is digital content. Not just mine, but others. And so I think they're trying to push us into a place where it's a digital currency, where you do as you're told or we'll turn off the tap. We, again, using all this metadata, we can see what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you're buying. And with this metadata, they can almost read your thoughts. And I've noticed this a bit as well. And I mean, I've got BT as an ISP, and I'm quite convinced that they're just selling my data, because I've looked at, when I've been looking to set up a new business, I've looked at various websites, and I'm talking about dodgy ones, I'm talking about business-related websites that I've never looked at before, because I've had my own business for years. But when I'm setting up a new one, I'm looking at new business-related websites. And then what I'm saying is, if I go onto Facebook, because I've set up a Graham French 24/7 Facebook page, by the way, if you want to join that, I'm looking at stuff on Facebook and I'm getting adverts for stuff I looked at yesterday. And I say, hold on a minute. I looked at that website yesterday, and until yesterday, I'd never looked at that website. And because I've done a lot of work on data warehousing and aggregation of data, and stuff I did for BT, we're pulling in like tens of millions of lines of data a day, building, extract, transform and load ETL processes called. You're transforming it into aggregated tables of daily, weekly, monthly, and then you put your reports on top of the aggregated data, not the tens of millions of lines. You do it over tens of thousands of lines of data as opposed to tens of millions. That makes the reports run a lot quicker. Because I know because I've designed the processes myself of pulling the data out, transforming it and loading it, I think, okay, so that tells me there's probably an overnight process from BT to drag all the data out, goes off to a data broker, there's probably a middleman on this, and then that middleman then sells that data to whoever wants to buy it. And I've seen deals like these, not with BT, but deals where people pull in all this data and data aggregators and they then sell that data. And I've seen it for courts as well, people at finance, insolvency. I've known businesses that they put people in the court and they're typing away on an iPad. That data is uploaded to their main database, and then you've got people who sell finance who then buy in, and these people spend a lot of money. All the law courts in Britain, all the magistrates courts in Britain, they'll all have like one or two people in that collect and collate this data, then it gets uploaded in real time to their, either in the cloud or in their data warehouse, in a data center, sorry. And then you've got customers, like large financial institutions, that'll then send you a letter. Oh, we notice you're having trouble with this. Would you like to have some finance? Or they'll try and package up some sort of finance. So that's a very, very good example of where people will pay a lot of money for your data. So BT are doing it. And it's happened not once, but twice. I thought, right, I'll keep an eye on this. And it's happened twice now, where I've looked at one specific site, and that site's come up on Facebook the next day. So because I've done a lot of this, we call it the window of opportunity, overnight batch processing jobs, where you pull the data around, because during the night, your network is really quiet because you haven't got people on pulling stuff and saving files to file shares and watching YouTube videos and listening to radio and stuff. So you don't have that network traffic on. So what you do is you move data around a lot around the network, gives you the opportunity to clean down various databases or logs. Or if you've got intrusion detection systems, allows you to pull down all that data and then aggregate it and put it away. So that's like your overnight batch processing. I'm just looking at some of your comments. Cash in hand jobs. Yeah. Well, I used to be a joiner. Plenty of govy jobs, plenty of cash in hand jobs. Yeah, go down to the mechanics. How much is that for cash? All that goes away. So, and it's a multi-billion-pound market, the black market, the cash job market. So they want to get rid of all that. They want to. It's a case of control everything. Again, having been inside government organisations, yeah, you can look at it from their perspective, especially tax collectors, HMRC. They've got a mindset. They are like the Borg, where, oh God, all these people, they go on, you hear them drone on and on and on about all this black market stuff and cash jobs and that. And before you know it, they come in the next week and they go, oh yeah, got my kitchen fitted, got a cash job, they're just as bad as everybody else, but they've got this sort of virtue signalling going on. Utter nonsense. So getting back to virtual private networks and selling of metadata, I will go into that in another podcast. But getting back to rebellion, last bit. In political terms, rebellion and revolt are often distinguished by their different aims. If a rebellion generally seeks to evade and/or gain concessions from an oppressive power, no more said on that one. A revolt seeks to overthrow and destroy that power. It may come to that. I think we may have to. I think start off with rebellion and may have to go into revolt. The peasants are revolting, as well as its accompanying laws. And I think we do have to do a bit of that. We have to get this COVID-19 law. I mean, that's based on a 1984 law, which states that a magistrate has the power to quarantine one sick person. I think it's for 14 days. And this COVID-19 law, this 2020 law, is based on that 1984 law. So the entire law itself is, in my opinion, unlawful. The goal of rebellion is resistance, while the revolt seeks a revolution. As power shifts relative to the external adversary, or power shifts within a mixed coalition, or positions harden or soften on either side. An insurrection may seesaw between the two forms. And I think that's a decision we've really got to have a thing on. What would be the aims of a rebellion or a revolt? And this is something I want to talk about as well, is I think what I've seen over the years, and looking at, I mean, we're talking about things, and I mentioned on Anna Breeze's channel about this PC culture. That's the start of it, and it's like it's a Marxism and everything but name. It's the shutting down of people's speech. It's the you can't say that because that's offensive. It's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's the we should be considerate. And I had a chat with one woman who was she was a definite fourth wave feminist, like, and she was on about equity. And I was said as PC culture is utter nonsense. It's like some sort of Marxist power grab. A bit like the fourth wave feminism isn't about equality for women. It's about power over men. It's not. It's almost like a sexual, not sexual, but sex-based supremacy. It's woman supremacy over men. As if you wanted to be truly equal. If you want to be truly equal between men and women, you can work in any industry you want, but it always seems to be the ones inside in the air-conditioned offices. I mean, I've been on many building sites, and I've been obviously past many roadworks. I've yet to see a single female working on the tools on a building site or on a construction site, on the roadworks. I'm sorry. Or how many tree surgeons do you know that are female? How many people that work down, on the power lines do you know are female? I've not known any. And I've worked in many industries where there's maintenance crews, whether it's wind farms or it's working out in the Middle East where it was, there's no women out there apart from in the office anyway. But, lots of these workforces, these labour-based workforces are almost 100%. Well, in fact, I've never seen a female do it. I've only ever seen men. I've not met any women chippies or electricians, sparks, or I've never met any female bricklayers or roofers or glaziers. Never met one. Not one. And I've been on hundreds and hundreds of these sites. I was doing all the work, all the IT work for Selfridges. I spent 3 months on Oxford Street, and the retail industry is pretty much female-based, almost exclusively. Small percentage of males, but heavily female. Spent 3 months in the Trafford Centre, setting up all the PCs, and the tills are really just PCs with a cash drawer, a screen, and a card reader. In IT, there's very few females as well. It's changing slightly, but not massively. And everybody I saw working in the Trafford Centre for 3 months was male, apart from 2 females I saw, and they were doing the gold leaf around some columns. But I was watching the bloke do all of the spray painting inside the food hall. He was doing the clouds on this massive scissor lift with a big spray paint, like paint spray type thing, painting the clouds on, thinking, that's clever how he does that. So I was learning loads of stuff about how to put shopping centres together. When they brought the fountains in, and built those, it was all blokes. There's no equality. It's all about supremacy. It's female supremacy. And if you listen to them, they talk like they want to be in power, not equality. So anyway, this one was going on about equity, and equity really is equality of outcome. So we all get the same outcome, regardless of effort put in. We all get the same outcome, and that's really what communism and socialism is. Well, that's what the utopian dream is anyway. It never turns out like that. And she was using this example of, there's 3 boys, it's 3 boys looking over the fence of a football club, and one's tall, medium and short, and there's 3 boxes, and there's a tall box, a medium box and a short box. And she said, in order for it to be equitable, it should be the short boy that gets the tall box, and the medium boy gets the medium box, and the tall boy gets the short box. And I went, well, that's interesting. My question really is why aren't they on the inside having paid for a ticket? Because they're, as far as I'm concerned, they're just stealing it from the people that have worked hard to buy a ticket. And she went, oh, Graham, you're so factual and literal, aren't you? I went, yeah, I am. So that's just like a communist belief, and didn't really speak to us a lot after that, mind. So yeah, so this whole left-wing Marxist, Antifa, BLM, which again is a Marxist, socialist, communist, it tends to start, and it has started from this PC culture. And I remember when I was a kid, again, my mother used to do this stuff for the Labour Party for Nick Brown. And my mother used to have these massive New Year's parties. And I remember one New Year's, I was about 12 or something, we went to this woman's house, and she was a CND supporter. And she was telling me, why we shouldn't have nuclear weapons of this and nuclear weapons of that. And even at 12, I thought, God, this woman's she's like brainwashed. She's like trying to indoctrinate me into the CND. I didn't know it was left wing then, and I just thought it was completely unnatural, you know. And I used the analogy of a boy with a big stick. I said, okay, let's use instead of nuclear weapons, because I was only 12. I said, if there's a boy in the playground with a big stick and he's going to come and hit me with it, what I need really is a bigger stick to hit him with, and therefore he won't hit me with a big stick, will he? Because I've got a big stick and probably a bigger stick than he has, so he'll not hit us. Maybe it's just the way my mind's thinking, but that's so yeah. I think these left wingers try and indoctrinate children as well, and I've seen this a lot with my kids. My kids are thankfully a lot more open minded than that. But you see, like at schools and universities especially, you know, you've got all these Marxist professors that try and indoctrinate kids, and you'll often see kids go in looking normal. They come out with some, like, after 3 years, and they've got all these weird piercings and tattoos, and their hair's a funny colour and shaved and they're dressing odd. And they're shouting at people in the face, and they're shouting at old people, and they're punching people in the street because, you know, words are violence. And now they're saying silence is violence, and that's really just a way of using violence against you, because if you don't think like them, you're the enemy and you must be, but like the Nazis, you must be suppressed and oppressed using violence or the threat of violence. So, and this is what I'm, like, Marxists, they've really just done a rebranding job, and that's what these common purpose types are like of Cameron and Tony Blair. You know, these are just renamed puppets. No drugs, no cheap rates, no money laundering, only government. Yeah, that's one way. I'm just reading your comments here. I typed enema into Google. Now I'm an expert on internal bum washing, courtesy of YouTube and Facebook. Well, you've always got that to sell for cash or for favours, maybe. Got any thought-provoking quotes? Liked your take on the yellow skin. I'm not sure what that means. Yellow skin. What did I say about yellow skin? Not sure what that's. You'll have to, Paul, you're gonna have to expand on that, mate. Not sure what that means. Now this takes me onto the Fabian Society, because as well as common purpose and this indoctrination by common purpose, and we're paying for that with our taxes for all these training sessions that these people go into, the police and what have you. I'd also recommend you looking at the Fabian Society, because that is a Marxist or communist organisation that Tony Blair is a member of, and he actually went into it was the LSE, London School of Economics, and I'm going to show you here. I've actually got this bit to work. I haven't got the keynote to work, but he actually went into, and he did some sort of dedication or speech or presentation when the window of the Fabian Society was damaged somehow, and they fixed it, and he went and gave a speech about it. And the Fabian Society, their logo, you're going to love this one. Their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And communists, and China's the same, communists often have these 100-year plans, and China's one of their 100-year plans was regreen the desert. The Gobi Desert was one of them. They've done quite well with that. There was the one-child thing, that was a 100-year plan. They've now changed that. Another one of 100-year plans was to take over the world. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, because that's where this COVID-19 hoax came from. And Tony Blair, I mean, he was arrested, and he was prosecuted in 1983 at the Bow Magistrates Court, which he shut down almost immediately in 1997 when he got into office. But he was charged in Bow Magistrates Court for importunity in a public toilet with another male. Tells you everything you need to know. But he appeared under his middle names. I don't know how he did that. He didn't appear in court as Tony Blair. He appeared in court as Charles Linton. That's Lynton. Look into it. And I remember this when it happened at the time, because I was only a kid. And I'll read you what it says. Do a search on this on Google. In 1983, a Bow Street Magistrates Court, a certain Charles Linton, Tony Blair, was fined £500 for attempted soliciting in city toilets. The police notes were to disappear later, along with several prior warnings. Charles Linton was well known. This is another thing most people don't know about. Charles Linton, or Tony Blair, was known at university as Miranda. So if you ever see him in the street, you should show how you doing, Miranda. A promiscuous crossdresser who played the guitar badly. Charles Linton are the middle names of Tony Blair. So that is true. The Bow Street Magistrates bit. And I've seen several different sources independently mention that he's called Miranda Blair because of what he did at university. But here he is at the Fabian Society at London School of Economics, where they've temporarily got this window, and there he's unveiling it, pulling the old cord and opening the curtains. So he's basically a communist. And I believe, he's a sexual deviant. I think Gordon Brown, and again, this is just my opinion, I think Gordon Brown is as well. And I think there's, again, getting back to this 4% I keep talking about if we have this, or when we have this rebellion, not if, because it's happening now, for this rebellion to work, we only need 4%, the 20% of 20%, for people to stand up and start rebelling against the government and the police, etc. And I think it's the inverse is true. In order to corrupt the politicians, you only need 4% of the politicians. It's probably more than that. We hear some weird and wonderful stories about all these. Peter Mandelson, he got done for fraud because on his mortgage application, he said he hadn't had any other loan when he knew he did. So he didn't serve any jail time. So he appears to be, again, it might just be the fact they're perverted. It's the fact that they're, from a money perspective, they're easily manipulatable as well. And when you go for your security clearance, whether you're in the armed forces or you're doing government contracts like I've done, one of the things they look at in order to get you top secret security clearance is, are you easily malleable from a financial perspective? And I've known people get knocked back from this. One guy I spoke to, he put an appeal in for it and he got it. They quoted the size of his mortgage. And I think, and he said, and I think he's right on this one, he said he feels as if because he previously got it, and he was no difference in his mortgage size, because you've got to renew it every, it depends, last SC clearance I had was 10 year, but it's usually 5 year. So he's had it in the past, he went for it again, he got knocked back, and it was the size of his mortgage, and he said, well, the mortgage size is, I paid a bit of it off over 5 years, so it's slightly smaller than last time. So, these people are supposed to be security cleared, probably up to DV level. I would have thought of being a prime minister. That's what's called developed vetting, and developed vetting's far more intrusive. And they've got to get your friends in and ask all sorts of questions on these people. Jordan Peterson interpretation of the Bible: who would rule the world? The meek. I'll talk about that in a minute, actually. So these MPs are supposed to be, I think, at least SC cleared, possibly DV cleared. And if they did the jobs properly, even SC clearance is enough. Because when I first did me security clearance for the armed forces, it was all about communism. Do you know any communists? Do you know any Irish? Because it was all about Irish terrorism back then. Because I'm a combat engineer. I'm trained to blow things up, in mine clearance and mine laying and stuff. Want any IEDs made? Yeah, that's not a problem. So it's a case of you've got to be security cleared, and it appears like Mandelson somehow got security clearance. Blair somehow got security clearance, but he's quite clearly a sexual deviant who's a communist. So it just beggars belief at times, and it makes me quite irritated, shall we say. Like George Bernard Shaw is well known as a writer and Fabian Society member. Didn't know that. So yeah, we've got all this fifth columnist infiltration by, it's basically a rebranding of Marxism and communism. And I think that's what a lot of this these mermaids people are. Again, looking at that, there's some dodgy characters. And this whole not putting back on the thing. This whole sort of activism around, and I know people who've transgender movement. These transgender activists aren't for proper transgender people. I know people who are transgender, and he was trans into a girl. She said that who are these people to speak for me? I've never voted for them. These people are just self-important virtue signalers who decide that they speak for everybody in the transgender who's a transgender, and they don't speak for me. And she was getting quite annoyed that these people just, oh yes, I speak for everybody. I speak for everybody in this. It doesn't matter if it's transgender or certain whatever type of organisation. They've just, it's like people with blonde hair. I've decided I've got blonde hair. I speak for everybody with blonde hair, or I speak for everybody who's right-handed. You don't. They've just decided that's what they want to do. And a lot of these activists are really offending the sort of man, woman, or transgender person in the street, where they just want to get on with their lives, and they're making their life more difficult because they're getting tarred with that same brush. And I think, again, it's a general. It seems like a general drive to me to try and break down our society from these various communist or Marxist organisations, and it's infiltrating every sector of society. And that's why I think, and especially government, and it just makes you wonder who's really controlling it. And I know people have mentioned various banks, and this is what brings me back eventually to Mein Kampf. So if you haven't read it, or if you definitely if you can, I might even put a link in actually. If you sign up for Audible, you get like one free book, and then you can cancel it before 2 weeks, I think it is. Mein Kampf. If you listen to what Hitler says, I mean, don't get us wrong, he's a complete maniac. He bigs himself up like it goes out of fashion, and then he goes on about the Jews. His rhetoric about the Jews feels like it's half the book, but it's only 6%. But it's like quite onerous how he goes on about it. And if you do a little bit of research, do some digging around Rudolf Hess, because he helped him write it. He basically helped him type it. And I've also read that it was Rudolf Hess that put the whole anti-Semitic sort of idea into his head. But he talks about the central bankers, how they are really the enemy of the people. And he mentioned it back in this is in the early 1920s when he wrote the Mein Kampf. And you hear it repeatedly. And you hear about how the central bankers, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all these type of, and there's lots of people who are central bankers, but you don't know their names. How they've basically controlled both sides of both World War I and World War II and subsequent major wars. And then you get into the military-industrial complex as well, and how they're just basically war baiting. It's when we saw this Arab Spring back in the day, where you had Libya basically caught fire. They tried to do the same thing in Egypt. Was basically trying to start these insurgencies. Same in Ukraine. Same in Macedonia. And if you look into George Soros and all of the countries he's been barred from, and it seems to be a combination, again, do your own research on this, but this is what I found on my research. If you look at what happened in Ukraine, if you look at what happened with Burisma and the son of Biden, Hunter Biden, and what Hunter Biden did in China, and the finance he got because he went over there on Air Force 2 and seemed to trip over and get $1.5 billion in his back pocket. Look into that, because it seems to me that there's a lot of this public money, taxpayer money, not just in the US but also around the world, that gets paid into these non-governmental organisations. And in Ukraine it was US aid, and the Open Society, which is financed quite a lot by George Soros, where they're paying money into these anti-corruption departments, which are not what they say, they're actually corruption departments, and they're just laundering money. And this is what I see when our government's giving like 15 billion away in charitable giving. Well, I mentioned the other day of 71 million towards China, giving millions to India, who've got their own space program. Never understood that. Why are we borrowing 14 billion to give it away to other people? And to me, again, they gave 700 odd million away to this to get a vaccine. And having worked in government organisations, it just looks to me like it's a massive money laundering gambit. And what I am going to do is, in a future vlog, I'm going to go through how much money I think it should have cost for this track and trace app. I'm not a developer myself, but I've worked a lot with development companies. I've never done DevOps. I've written various little applications, and back in 2007 when the App Store came out, I wrote 3 little iPhone apps. Not because I wanted to make any money, because I didn't. I made about 30 quid. But I wanted to understand the process from, okay, I've got an idea. How do you get it on your iPhone? And I just went through how you create this, what software you used, how you got different pages to work, learned a bit Objective-C, pushed it out onto the App Store, and I sold a few of them. I think it was like £1 each or something, or maybe less actually, maybe 59 pence. But I just wanted, for me, it was more important to understand the process. And that's how I fell into IT anyway, because I just didn't understand email. So I'm going to, and I've a mate of mine, I'm more infrastructure, I do about 80% infrastructure and about 20% software-based stuff. There's a mate of mine, he's also an architect, and he does mainly 80% software and 20%. So I might, I don't know if he's going to appear on the vlog, but I'll get some input from him as to, because you've got various people that do various things when it comes to designing and implementing software. It's like designers and program and project managers, and people that design the user interface, the user experience. You've got people who will do the database on the device, the database at the back end, which is like cloud-based usually. And then at the back end of the system, because you've obviously got to do the track and trace bit on the devices, they couldn't get it to work with something around the Bluetooth shenanigans, not sure what that means. You've got all of the interaction on the device, then you've got the bit where it uploads the data to usually the cloud or the data center, and then you've got the back end bit, which is how you calculate, Joe blogs, he's been infected, let's look at everybody who's interacted with him within a certain radius, within a certain time frame. So you'll need an element of that, so you need the back end part designed as well. And then if you decide that Joe blogs has been infected, he's had interactions with 100 people, then you need the ability from the back end perspective of how to then alert those 100 people. And then don't forget, you've also got to have the ability to sell that data, because that's what government's all about. So there'll be various ETL processes to put into that to extract, transform and load that data straight into Palantir, because they're just going to hoover all our data up. But yeah, that's a different subject. So that's going to be a future podcast, because I can tell you now, a track and trace app on smartphones does not cost anywhere near 12 million quid. Nowhere near. 1.2 maybe, a couple of million at a stretch. But 12 million, that's just one massive, straight in your back pocket. We'll sort you out later, son, don't you worry. That's complete bungum. Yeah, so we'll do that. Right, let's see if you've got any questions. Got any Jordan Peterson's interpretation of the Bible, rule the world? Oh yeah, because he said, and I think I put Cable as competent. So Jordan Peterson said, he said the meek shall inherit the earth, and he spent quite a bit of time researching what the word meek meant, and he thinks it was a mistranslation from the Greek meek, and he thinks meek really means those who are competent with swords yet keep them sheathed shall inherit the earth. And this is what I talk about, and this is one thing I'm going to put in my book actually. It's about and he talks about creating the monster, and this is what I say to people: there's a difference between being peaceful and being harmless. If you're capable of great violence yet you decide to be non-violent, that's what's called being peaceful. If you've decided to be non-violent because you can't be violent, that's being called harmless, and there's a massive difference. I'm peaceful, I'm certainly not harmless, and I advise you to learn to be violent. And I don't mean go around bashing people. I mean to have the capability to be competent at being extremely, extremely violent, only if you need to, but keep it all in. And then that does give you a certain confidence, but also gives you a certain ability to walk away from situations, because once you're capable of great violence, you've got nothing to prove to anybody else, because you know what you're capable of. You don't get into stupid fights. I was down the town a while back. This must be about a year ago now, maybe it's a bit longer. And there was one bloke who I'd never met before. There was a group of us, and mid-40s, were in bar down the Big Market, which is in the centre of Newcastle, up on a second or third floor, and we were sitting on this table, another bench, and there was 2 or 3 lads sitting here, and there was us 2 or 3. There were some lads at the bar of our group, and he said, this bloke, I can't remember his name, let's call him Tony. That's not his name, but let's just call him Tony. Tony said to me, "Oh, Graham, when was the last time you had a fight?" I was like, "What do you mean?" "I know, in the town, last time you had a fight." I said, "Last time I had a fight? I can't think. Like decades. There's no need to have a fight unless someone's attacking you," which that has actually happened to me, but and I've got a bit of a story around that as well, which nearly ended badly for the other bloke. I said, why the hell would I want to fight? The thing about learning martial arts, it allows you to recognise the actual dance. It's almost like a dance that happens when people attack you, unless it's just like a random attack, which is quite difficult to defend against. There's usually a procedure, a process, a dance people go through, because people very rarely just run up and smack you in the face. That's pretty rare, unless you're Antifa, of course. That's pretty rare, and it's being able to recognise that process and walk away, because you go, oh, hold on, it's getting up here, it's starting to kick off here, time to leave. And there's nothing big and clever about beating people up at all. That's the last thing you should be doing. So being capable of great violence allows you to not have to use it. And when it comes to the meek shall inherit the earth, I truly believe, and I think Jordan Peterson's 100% right on this, and there's those who are capable, in this case, of great and extreme violence, yet decide not to, shall inherit the earth. And I think that is quite correct. Hi Subdulate, how you doing? Good to see you. So if you can have all the money in the world and it means nothing to you, what's next, power crazy psychopath? Yeah. I mean, I've known some very rich people. I know some very rich people. There's one bloke who I worked for in the Middle East. He was pretty much a billionaire. He will be now, mind. He'd inherited the business in the Middle East, and he was in 5 different countries in the Middle East. I had about $750 million turnover when I was working for him. This is about 8 or 9 years ago. So he'll be a billionaire now, or certainly knocking on the door too. And he was just a normal bloke. And in the past, I've known millionaires who've just been normal people. You wouldn't be able to tell. They'll drive like a 10-year-old car, and they'll just dress like as if they've just been gardening. And they're just normal people with money. And you tend to find those people that flash it. Not everyone, but a lot of time it's people buy stuff with money they don't have to impress people they don't even like, And I've heard stories of, again, I've never been to Monaco, but I do know people who have, and I've been told stories of these millionaires who hire these yachts for a week, cost them tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds, and all they're doing is standing or sitting on the yacht, drinking champagne, watching people watch them drinking champagne on the yacht, and that's really what they've hired it for. These are quite shallow people, and I've met quite a few of these shallow people, but I've met genuine, rich, multi-millionaire people. And again, I've done VC, venture capital funded, so I've actually spoken to these people who are, and again, it's companies rather than people who are VC funded. And most rich people I've met are just like you and me, just normal. True, I'm into martial arts and know the damage I can do and walk away. Yeah. There's nothing big and clever. I mean, I spoke to one guy who's been doing ninjutsu. He's a black belt in ninjutsu, has been for about 35 years. I mean, him we're talking about, having never fully used it. I mean, I've had to like quieten a few people down by doing the small moves, but you don't have to beat the 9-7 bells out of people, living crap out of people, unless they're attacking you. You can see it's coming most of the time. Yeah, just walk away. There's nothing big and clever about beating people up, And also the karma side of it, what goes around comes around. And you can usually tell these sort of people when they're in the dojo, there's new people that come in, you can spot them a mile off. The ones who just want to learn it to beat people up, to use it to oppress people. I don't know what it is, it's just got this persona about them. And one guy who came in, very full of himself, and John, who's the instructor, he just didn't pull his punches a bit, shall we say, and give it a bit rougher than normal sort of first lesson, and he never came back. So yeah, you can tend to spot these idiots a mile off. Right, time is it now? Oh, we've been going for like nearly 2 hours. I was trying to keep us about 45 minutes, if the truth's be known. Have I touched everything? Yes, I've talked about common purpose, Fabian society, the PC, and the cancel culture, which is all I think is really part of that. And I've spoke about previously about where to find me. So I'm on Brands and YouTube. I'm on Twitter, Parler. And Parler, what I have noticed as well is Parler's not the free speech platform it says it is, or it likes you to think it is, because I've heard of a few people being kicked off that. So just be mindful of that. I'm on Facebook. If you look at Graham French 24/7, I've got a business page. I've just started to set that up. It's not finished yet. I'm on minds.com. I'm on Gab. I'm on Library. Actually, I'm having a bit of a technical issue. I've got to look at that again, actually. I'm on Brighteon. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, and I think it's Insta_Graham French 24/7. And I'm also at Graham French 24/7. So definitely subscribe. Click the notification. If you go to grahamfrench.com, grahamfrench247.com/donate, there's Subscribe Star, Patreon, a few different digital currencies on there, cryptocurrencies. If you want to donate any money, that'll be great. I'm going to get the merch store set up. I've got some good stuff, some designs in my head, and when I design stuff, I tend to do 80% of my designs, doesn't matter what it is, in my head. And people find this quite strange because I'll design some highly technical stuff in my head, and sometimes when I'm not even thinking about it, I tend to sleep on stuff, and I'll wake up in the morning, I've got an idea how to do that. Actually, one thing I am going to announce is I've got a few inventions because I've come across some real world problems, and I've started, just instead of doing giving technical solutions to technical problems, I've started looking at some real world problems. And if you look at one of the previous vlogs I've done on previously, it's about the adulteration of gold. I think I might have I'll call it quite a simplistic design to fix that problem. I've got to run it past one of my mates. Again, he's an architect, because I came up with a design in about 10 minutes, but I spent the next 3 days researching it, because for me it seems it's all using existing technology. I haven't reinvented the wheel. And if you look into how, again, watch that YouTube video I've done. If you look into how they test gold, it's like hit it with a hammer and listen to it. It's an acid test, which only really looks at the surface of gold, or the Archimedes principle style of thing, where it's displacement of water versus the weight of it. I've come up with there's other methods as well around X-ray and stuff, but I'm looking at it from a commercial perspective. So there's $7 quadrillion worth of gold and precious metals. That's the size of the market. That's 7 with 15 zeros on the end of it. That's how big this precious metals market is. And I think there's trillions of dollars of fraud going on. Mainly, a lot of it's from China. No surprises there. But China's also being hit by it. They've just recently been hit again for billions of dollars, where people have deposited gold as a security, borrowed some money, defaulted on the loan, and then they've went to melt the gold down. The first time, I think it was in the Xinjiang province, they found out it was only 39% gold, I think it was, because mainly it was tungsten. And this last time, again, billions of dollars worth of gold they thought they had, and it was copper. I'm just fascinated how these people are lending billions of dollars worth of loans to people and they're not even testing the deposits, the security deposits. It's quite mind-blowing. So I think I've come up with the methods from on a commercial scale to do it quite cheaply in comparison to how much the loans are worth anyway. And I've decided I'm going to give it away, because I think, I've still got to verify it and ratify it. But if this works how I think it should work, I mean, it's worth probably billions of dollars as invention, but I'm going to give it away to people because I think it's too much to have in any one person's hands. But I'm going to come on to that later. And again, I mentioned at the start, I don't know, for those people who weren't in, I'm also a beekeeper as well. And I'm more into the traditional, the very old traditional way of beekeeping. And I've got an old chest freezer, which got broke, actually. Got damaged on a house move. So all of the refrigerant leaked out of it. It was isobutane. So it's not as bad as the other stuff. It'll blow you up, like. And I kept it in the garage for years, and I thought, I'm going to see if I can repurpose this, because to get it fixed cost more than, it was cheaper just to buy another fridge. Yeah, so what I'm going to, I've had this idea the other day, and I thought I need to, because I keep it's in the garage, just getting in the way, and I thought I'm going to need to do something with that. And I thought, right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this chest freezer, into a beehive. So I'm going to clad it. I'm not just going to stick a chest freezer in my garden. I'm going to clad it with some sort of material. I'm going to build the inside out and drill some holes and make it into a beehive, because one of the designs I'm going to around this bee conservation I'm going to set up, because I'm going to set up a British native bee conservation organisation. Is I'm going to use insulated hives instead of the stacked type of hive. I'm going to have like a long hive, they call it, and I'm going to insulate it because it tends to be better from the bee's perspective, both in the summer and winter, because overwintering seems to be a bit of a bad thing. And in with the bee conservation, I'm not just looking at the honeybee. I am mainly looking at honeybee, but there's also in with the bumblebee, and also in with that is working with local authorities and customers of various shops. I'm going to try and approach to get sponsorship for it. And that's the model I'm going to use. It's going to be a case of sponsor a hive or sponsor a cluster of hives. Have some sort of like dollar bee club, sort of like bit like sponsoring animals in zoos. So, and also planting of wildflowers as well. So if you say I'm going to sponsor a hive, then we'll go, okay, well, we'll plant X square feet, or whatever it's going to be. I'll work it all out. Or we'll send you some, or in a certain area, we'll send you some wildflower seeds, because I talked previously about the accumulation of small changes, and this is also the approach I'm going to use with the planting of wildflowers, specifically for bees and other like butterflies and stuff. Is that if we just do lots and lots of square feet of wildflowers, it makes a massive difference over time. Right, any questions you've got, people? Let's have a look. It was nice catching up. Live show, found you through Anna. All right, good to see you. Subdue light, good idea, thanks. Graham, you don't want to say me in a bee suit. I've only ever been stung once, actually. Like in me life, by a bee. One of the first beehive I got, actually. Yeah, I've never been stung by wasps, because what I found when I was a kid is that if you go, oh, there's a bee, you're going to get stung. If you just, because the bees aren't interested in you, they're only interested in the flowers, only interested in getting the pollen and the nectar. So if you just like completely ignore the bees or the wasps, they'll just ignore you. So that's a philosophy I've had since I was a kid. And the only time I've been stung was, and I knew, the thing is, I've had some sort of premonition about it, because I was thinking, when it comes to beekeeping, the best time to go in and do your hive inspections, I do irregular hive inspections. I've got to have a reason. The standard beekeeping approach in the Western world is pretty much every week. Get in the hive, take it apart, inspect this, inspect for that. I don't do that. I had to requeen one hive, and I left it for a couple of weeks, and I went and checked on to make sure. I put the queen in, leave her there for 48 hours inside the cage, release her, check after about 48 hours to make sure she hasn't like done a runner. Left her for a couple of weeks. I've checked it today when it was sunny. I've lost a beehive this year as well, which is a bit unfortunate, but that was from a split. And what you'll find at this time of year is there's robbing by other bees. They'll go and rob sort of like weaker hives, and that's what happens. And I went in today, and just everything's gone. All the bees are gone, all the honey and the nectar and the pollen, all that's gone. And that's just one of the downsides, I suppose. So I'll get another. I'm going to see if I can get some swarms in there as well. But this other beehive, the one where I requeened it with the native British black bee, that's doing really well. In fact, I put that in about 2 weeks ago. I checked today, and actually it's probably longer than that now. It's probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. I checked today, and I was just as a bee was emerging from its cell. That was like, it was like watching a baby being born. It's like, oh, I've got a little bit of it on camera. But because the queen was on that frame, I don't want to keep it out the hive for too long. So I watched that for a few minutes as the bee digs its way, takes the cap off, and then has a bit of a rest, and then comes out. And the first thing, that's like a worker bee, first thing the bee does after it emerges from its cell, it cleans its own cell. And there's different, the bees, there's one queen bee, or sometimes there's two, about 10% of the hives there's two queen bees. And the bee goes through different stages of its life. And also what I saw today, as well as the bees in the summer don't last anywhere near as long, because they literally work themselves to death. So you'll see bees dying outside of the hive as well, because once a bee's against its hive mentality, once a bee's done its useful work in life, they literally get kicked out of the hive by the other bees. It's like, right, you've done your work, 6-8 weeks in the summer, out, and you'll go outside and you'll see like today there was 2 or 3 bees that were just, you'll see them, they don't move, and within a 10, 15, 20 minutes or a couple of hours they'll eventually just expire. But that's quite sad to see, but that is the life of the bee. Wildflowers. I've got some in the garden. I've planted quite a few this year, but sometimes it take 2 years. So they're growing now, but they might come into flower next year. And I've just been out today. I've got quite a few wild poppies, and they didn't really flower well this year. But I've got some pink poppies, and I've just been out and collected all the dead heads, all the seed heads, because they will eventually turn brown, and then you turn them upside down, all the seeds come out. So I've collected them. I'm going to spread them around a bit more. Yeah, never been stung yet. Well, yeah, and if you've never been stung, you do often think to yourself, well, if I do get stung, am I going to die of anaphylactic shock? Right. I think that's it. If anyone's got any more questions, please let me know. Thanks very much for tuning in. I know it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. This will go up to. I mean, this is the first time I've done a few test live streaming, but I'm using some software called Streamlabs OBS. Again, I'm just looking at different technical solutions. I thought I'd try because there's lots of open source software which I would recommend you look at. I mean, I'm totally off Microsoft now. I don't have any. I've used Microsoft. I was Microsoft qualified since, crikey, late 90s, I think. NT4, yeah, it would have been late 90s, mid to late 90s. So I've been MCSE, Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer qualified since the 90s. Now I've just kiboshed all that. I mean, I've spent thousands on Microsoft books and software and qualifications and what have you. But just the other week, I've got rid of my Microsoft account. I'm using some software now, and it's called, hold on, bear with. Have I got it on this section here? Only Office, that's what it is. And I've looked at LibreOffice and a few other types of Office type software. And I'm actually doing that gold adulteration. I'm calling it the fourth test. That is that sort of invention of and it's just a concept. It's a design concept I'm putting together. So I'm doing that on the Word document version and as an Excel spreadsheet. I've tried using the Apple stuff, the pages and what have you, and the numbers. I just can't get away with it. But this only Office, sorry, not Open Office, that's another one. This only Office seems to be pretty close to Microsoft from a user's perspective and a user interface perspective. So the learning curve's virtually non-existent. And when I'm using spreadsheets, I mean, because I design IT solutions, people think I'm an expert in everything, and I'm not. Not when it comes to Microsoft Office. And I think I've used a pivot table once in Excel. And I usually use spreadsheets for creating things, or counting things, or creating tables of things. I'm not like an Excel power user by any stretch of imagination. And when it comes to Microsoft Word, I don't really use that for documentation. I use a thing from Scooter Software, and because of how it's called Scrivener, by the way, because of how my brain works, when it comes to design, I don't start at the start and finish at the end. That's not how I design stuff. And I design stuff, it just, as it comes into my head, I then just put it down, and it's like, honestly, until the last 30 seconds, it looks a complete mess. And then the last 30 seconds, you go, oh, right, it's a completed document, well done. So that's how I design stuff. It's very much a scattergun approach. As it comes into my head, I write it down, or I document it, or stick it into Scrivener. And that's what I'm using. I'm using Scrivener to write my book. And this book, it'll shock you to the core what's going on, because I'm not going to give you too much about it, tell you too much about it now. But yeah, you won't believe what's happened to me in this book. Even I don't believe it, and I was there at the time. So, and it's taken us quite a long time to get around to writing this book, because it was quite a traumatic event. What happened? And it happened nearly 4 years ago now. So I'm now sort of screwing me off and getting down to writing that. Yeah, I think that's it. If anyone's got any questions, you can contact me wherever. I'm available all over the shop. Just do a search on DuckDuckGo. Don't use Google. Try and use an alternative. And I will cover this in yet another, and I've got lots of plans for stuff coming up. Another upcoming presentation I'm going to have is alternative ways to do stuff online. As like, don't use Google, now don't use Microsoft. Use different search engines, how to use things like virtual private networks, VPNs, but not just VPNs. There's a thing called Tor, which was created by the American Navy. And it's what's called the dark web, and it's some very, very nefarious people go onto that, but how to use it from a legal perspective, and I'm not suggesting you do anything illegal on it, obviously, but how to use it to protect you from the government, basically, or from the council, because the council can just go, oh, let's have a look what Graham's been up to, or anybody, they don't need a warrant, and I think we need to get rid of that. But stay good, keep it shiny side up, and